Hi, Mike Brantley, auctioneer. Got a note today from an auctioneer. He had a question. He said, could an auctioneer conduct an auction with a client on what's called a net listing? I'm familiar with net listing because I teach real estate, and real estate practitioners around the United States are largely prohibited from doing any net listings. In most states, it's illegal. But here's what a net listing is in the real estate side. A client hires me to sell their home, their real property with a home improved, and they think it's worth about $200,000. And I say, well, I think it's worth every bit of $200,000. Tell you what, you want a net $200,000? Owners say, yep, that we'd be happy with that. And the agent says, well, okay, I will list your real property in a net listing, and anything over $200,000 is my commission. If I get $210,000, I make $10,000. If I get $230,000, I get $30,000 in commission because you were able to net $200,000. The reason most states have outlawed net listings on the real estate side is that it incentivizes the agent to undervalue the property. Because if I undervalue my client's expectations and their perception of value, then I can maximize my commission. Well, let's talk about the auction side. Could an auctioneer contract with a farmer, for example? Now, farm equipment to sell, livestock, tools related. Sure. What do you think it's worth? Well, I think I got maybe $20,000, $25,000 worth of stuff here. Okay, tell you what, I'll make sure you net 25. Anything over 25 is my commission. Is that fair with you? Yep, it's fair with me. I just want to walk out of here with $25,000. Well, there's really $50,000 worth of stuff there. So the auction grosses $50,000, and minus some expenses for marketing and staff, etc. The auctioneer nets $20,000 in commission. So is that reasonable? Is that fair? Well, we live in a country where, to some degree, people are free to contract. And if we have competent parties, mutual assent, a meeting of the minds, some sort of consideration, people are free to enter into those contracts to some degree. We don't necessarily have a right to contract in any fashion we wish, but the notion that a seller could hire an auctioneer and say, I want a net 25, and well, anything over is yours. They seem to think that's fair. The auctioneer thinks that's fair. Well, then it'll be okay. You could think that way. But it does incentivize an auctioneer, whether the auctioneer realizes it or not, to undervalue that property in order to maximize their commission. In other words, the auctioneer isn't working as much for the client, advising the client, informing the client, disclosing to the client, advocating for the client to maximize the client's proceeds. The auctioneer is more incentivized to advocate for his own or her own position. Now, related to this, I saw where an auctioneer had conducted a with reserve auction, and that an item didn't meet the reserve. Let's say it was, I don't know, $10,000. And so the auctioneer talks to the seller and says, it didn't bring $10,000. What do you want me to do? And he said, well, if you give me $7,500, I'd be happy. So the auctioneer says, okay, let me see if I can get you $7,500. Well, he finds a guy that's willing to give, say, $9,000 for the property. Well, if the auctioneer is still working for the client, in other words, to be advocating or loyal to the client and endeavoring to maximize the client's position, that auctioneer would come back and say, well, I got great news. I didn't just get $7,500, I got $9,000. But this auctioneer apparently came back to that client and said, I got you your 75, here's your 75, and kept the difference. And that's certainly not proper unless it was disclosed to the client prior to entering into the arrangement, certainly, if not absolutely, at the time the money was dispersed. I got $9,000, you wanted 75. Is that still fair? Is that reasonable? Because most clients would say, well, gee, if you got 9,000, that's my 9,000. I'll pay you a fee, but I'm not going to pay you that much. So it's very similar to auctioneers, and we'll talk about this in a subsequent video, of auctioneers, say, in a reserve auction. This happens where the item doesn't quite bring the reserve and the auctioneer sells it nonetheless and then makes up the difference in or with part of their commission. In other words, the item is a $10,000 item. Well, they get up to $9,500. Well, the auctioneer's charging 20%. He's got $2,000 to work with, and he's only short $500. Sold for $9,500. Takes of his $2,000 commission or less, and puts that $500 over on that difference, and then keeps his commission. Better to get, the argument I've heard is, better to get something rather than nothing. Here again, I bring that up because here again, that's likely fine, but that would have to be disclosed to the client in the client and auctioneer's contract, and agreed to in that contract, and explained to that seller how that's going to work, or the auctioneer would not be able to do that. Again, auctioneers are agents for their seller. Finally, any of this kind of thing where the auctioneer is unjustly enriched, if you will, beyond norms, because, well, it was, you wanted 7,500 and I got 9, but I'm not telling you that, and that kind of stuff. Boy, that's short-term thinking. In other words, if we took care of that client, disclosed to the client, kept the client informed, kept advocating for the client, what's the client likely to do? As I've said before, the client is likely to tell their friends, their neighbors, their family, their co-workers, and others, this auctioneer is a great auctioneer. He treated me wonderful. If you ever need an auctioneer, here's the person I would hire. And aren't auctioneers looking for those kinds of referrals? I think, quite frankly, a lot of auctioneers rely on those kind of referrals. Mike Brantley, Auctioneer. Pleasure to be with you today. Other videos on this same page, others forthcoming. Have a great day. Stay safe.